A grading company was robbed and more than $300,000 of customer cards were taken. Now we've got the latest update on customers getting their money back and not so happy about it in all cases. We'll tell you the latest next. Hello, sports card investors, and welcome to another episode of Cards on the Table. Teapot and freshly shaven Doug. You're looking very handsome over there, Doug.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're looking like you are ready to take on the new year, especially your Detroit Lions there, Teapot. Look at that.
Yeah.
Looking good.
Yeah.
Playoffs around the corner.
Gift from my mom, gift from BB.
That's a nice gift.
I'll at least wear it today.
Hopefully it pays some dividends. Oh man, what is not paying dividends for some collectors is ace grading. The cards have been stolen. This is a little rough. Now look, some of you out there in the audience, you guys may not have heard of ace grading, or you may say, who's this small grading company? Who cares about them? No, actually, they're a big grading company in the UK, in the United Kingdom. They're a big alternative to PSA and CGC and SGC over there in the UK. They've gained a lot of market traction. A lot of TCG and sports cards, in particular TCG, are graded with ace grading from European collectors. And what happened back in December was that their office, where they do all of their grading, it got robbed. On Friday, December 13th, it was the target of a professional theft. And apparently, according to the owner of the company, there's signs and suspicions that the person who stole all of this had knowledge of the operation, had knowledge of where cards were kept and how to evade security measures, maybe an inside job, maybe an ex-employee, who knows exactly, but it was, what happened was $315,000 of cards were taken. And these were all cards that had been submitted by collectors, mainly in Europe, waiting to be graded. So obviously a big deal. Well, what happens, the company makes an announcement about this. This kind of gets some news coverage back in December. The company says they're working with insurance companies. They're going to try to figure out how to get people reimbursed. Now, here's the good news. Ace Grading was very responsive to the situation. They did begin to send out offers. Everybody who had their cards stolen, as far as I've seen through commenters and that kind of thing, got an offer and said, hey, we're going to reimburse you for your cards. And here's your cards that unfortunately are stolen. Here's your reimbursement amount. The challenge is what that reimbursement amount was. And there were a lot of people that were pretty upset by it. People were saying that they were offering as low as 20 to 30% what they believed the actual market value of their cards to be. Not everybody was upset. And apparently what was happening was Ace Grading was offering people the value of their cards in raw condition with potentially a little bit of, maybe lightly played, type of value for TCG cards in raw condition. But these people had submitted their cards for grading with the assumption, of course, that their cards were in perfect condition and that they were going to get GemRate 10s. So these people that submitted the cards off, and they're looking at what a GemRate 10 value might be on their card. And Ace Grading is saying we're going to reimburse you for raw condition and not perfect raw condition. And that's where the disparity lied. A lot of people were upset by the initial offers they got from Ace Grading, and others were happy. Others said, look, I understand the situation. I'll take what you give me. I'm sorry this happened to you, right? So now there were some people who said that they were able to negotiate with Ace Grading and say, I feel like this is unfair. And in some cases, Ace Grading did modify their offer and they came back and offered more money. They also offered credit towards future grading submissions, at least to some of the affected people. And this took some of the people that had an issue with their initial offers and made them more happy at the situation. So overall, it feels like the customer reception was a little bit mixed, but in general, Ace Grading did handle the situation with a lot of aggressiveness in terms of getting back to people quickly, managing it with a customer service focus. So that is good. It is worth noting that Ace Grading is continuing to operate in full capacity. They're taking new orders. They said that they were going to make significant upgrades to their security procedures to ensure nothing like this happens again. And they're kind of operating now like business as usual. If you go to their website, there's no mention of this on the homepage of their website or anything like that anymore. They've kind of put it in the past, and they're moving forward as a company. So, some good, some bad there. I can tell you guys, this type of thing terrifies me. Like here at Cards HQ, we have a grading partner. You know, we do grading through Got Baseball Cards. Customers will bring cards into Cards HQ, and then we'll transport them over to Got Baseball Cards. I'm always nervous about holding on to customers' cards because God forbid something like this happens. So I feel for Ace Grading. Do you guys think they handled it as best they could have given this? And would this type of situation like make you nervous about, could this happen in the future to cards you send to another grading company, PSA, Beckett, CGC? How concerned should we be about all this? I'll start with you, Teapot.
Well, how often do we have to talk about security?
Yeah.
Every week
Every
now?
episode, yeah.
Literally every week now, some form of
segment,
security. And it's one thing if it's your own cards in cash that you leave in the back seat while you go in to eat some hot wings and they get stolen. It's another thing if you run a business in an industry or a segment of the hobby that's ultra competitive and dominated by a big boy who, by the way, as we're going to talk about later, is expanding into Europe, and you're trying to build a name for yourself and you don't prioritize security. You've got to have security. So in a way, kudos for trying to make it right. And maybe now what about these customers who just took the original offer thinking it was all they could get, and now they're hearing others got negotiated values? Overall, stories like this leave me with a major pit in my stomach. I hate it. I hate the idea of it. I hate sending cards in the mail. I hate leaving my cards with somebody else, even if it's to get them graded. And I know we have great security here, and we put a lot of thought into that when we opened the shop. But overall, it's really concerning. The one silver lining in this, maybe it's not any consolation to the people who submitted, I don't know. If it was largely or entirely TCG or Pokemon cards, which as you said is a big part of their business model, you don't have one-of-ones in Pokemon. You don't have irreplaceable cards in Pokemon. Even the rarest ones are not irreplaceable cards. So if you're getting a refund for what that card was, at least raw value, or even maybe a graded, that's better. I looked on Market Movers. The most expensive card sold in the last year by Ace in an Ace 10 was under $2K. So again, it's not like you had some $50,000, $100,000 Pokemon card that got lost, and now they're trying to figure out and scramble. This was probably, you know, 3, 4, 10,000 different like lower dollar Pokemon cards that they had to write a check for. So, but that's concerning. It's really concerning, and you got to think about security. We're going to say it every week. It's going to keep happening. Be safe with your cards. Make sure they're secure. And as I said in one of my, buying and selling videos, like just be skeptical. Don't trust anybody too much, honestly.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, as a business owner, if it's an inside job, if you've, it's tough to protect against all of this from happening. I mean, even though we do have great security at Cards HQ, I still worry about, I'm sure there's still ways we're vulnerable, right? I'm sure it seems like everyone is vulnerable to an extent. It's a sad story. I don't love it. Doug, do you think, was Ace in the right by reimbursing people for the raw value of the cards? I mean, honestly, that's probably what other grading companies would do as well. I would imagine. I don't want to hold them to a different standard than what PSA or
this
CGC
is where declared value would come into play really nicely.
Yeah. What do you think about this?
I think that we should start our own podcast. We need a true crime podcast for the hobby at this point, right? Strike.
I feel like we need a crime investigator.
Yeah.
We need to be able to dispatch somebody over to London and have them get to the bottom of this.
If not that, then the next great, heist movie should be about the hobby. The Ocean's 17 or whatever it is going to be the great PSA heist, right? But as far as how they handled this, I'm glad it was prompt. One, for the customers to get a quick resolution of this, but also so the company can move on from that story. You don't want that story lingering for a large period of time. We're prone to moving on in the hobby from one story to the next. So we'll forget what happened to Ace and talk about the next thing next week, right? So I'm glad they went quickly. I do think it's not great that they were offering people 20% of raw value, like TCG player values, right? Like played cards. That's not great. But as long as they were open to negotiation and people had some control over, what they were requesting, I don't have any huge problem with that. I do think that's kind of a smart move if you're a professional criminal or, a professional crime syndicate or whatever. These cards are going to be largely untraceable, assuming they took raw cards and not graded cards. No serial numbers, no 4 out of 10 marked on the card or anything like that, right? And the values, and like you were just exactly like you were mentioning before, these aren't the most rare cards of all time. They're all replaceable. So if I were to go in with a specific TCG card to sell, it's not going to raise any eyebrows like a vintage PSA slab.
That's true. Right? That's true.
It's probably better than saying like robbing a bank, where the average bank robbery yields $5,000 cash. Now you can go get a bunch of untraceable raw cards for $300 grand. It's it's not the worst
Doug's
idea.
done his research on bank robbery.
I've done a lot of research on a lot of
If Doug shows up trying to sell Cards HQ $300,000 worth of Pokemon cards, I'm going to be a little suspicious of you, Doug.
But if I get caught, I'll just say I was testing your security measures. I was doing it for your benefit and nothing more. If I get away with it, then I get away with it. But I think American companies probably have better security than this. I would like to think that PSA, SGC, so on,
they are
already a little
companies.
bit.
They are bigger companies.
I would like to think they're already, more suited to handle this kind of threat. And if they're not, then they probably should be right now.
Yeah, those are good thoughts, Doug. And I do want to say that some people have reported that the owner of Ace Grading actually sold some of his personal collection in order to raise money to help pay customers out quicker. So if that's the case, I do want to give him a major shout out and props for that element of handling this situation. And it could very well be necessary because insurance companies can oftentimes take a long time to process claims, and they may only be giving a fraction of the money back or whatever. So he may be wanted to get his customers, paid out more quickly, not keep them waiting. And it does seem like, although they weren't all happy with his offer and some felt it was too low, it does seem like at least everybody got the offer very quickly, got the notification quickly. So that aspect of this, I do think, was a really good thing. But yeah, it's a scary story, and I hope that it's one that we don't have to hear repeated again. It's just yet another reminder about the importance of security and how valuable these little pieces of cardboard actually are, and unfortunately the crime that can bring to the table. All right, we got some other big stories today. We're going to talk about this crazy thing going on with patch cards and not from the player that they say they're going to be. We're going to get to that in just a second. But first, I want to let everybody know Arena Club is starting the year with, my God, some big cards. Their grail for their Ruby basketball slab packs, which drop tomorrow, Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, is a 2006 SP Authentic Michael Jordan LeBron James dual auto BGS 9.5. That is like an $18,000 card. And then in baseball, the Ruby slab packs can contain a Juan Soto 2016 Bowman First Gold out of 50 auto BGS 9.5. That's a $22,000 card. And then in football, they've got a Lamar Jackson 2018 Flawless 1/1 auto. That's with a patch. That's also, all of those are BGS 9.5. Massive, massive cards. They're starting the year in a big way. If you haven't tried one of these Arena Club slab packs yet, try them tomorrow. When they drop, get one of those Ruby packs. And if you use promo code SCI20, you're going to get 20% off your first purchase. So go to the App Store on your phone, download the Arena Club app right now. And then when the slab packs drop, Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, go buy one. Use promo code SCI20 for 20% off. Okay. This was quite the social story that happened over the last week. Coach Co Collectibles has a great Instagram account for everybody to go follow. He got a Brock Purdy jersey card from the new 2024 Absolute that just came out. And he decided to see, well, was this patch actually from Brock Purdy? Now, in fairness, the card says not from any particular player game, or event, not associated with anything. It can be anything, and anything it was, because he actually ripped the card apart, took it out, and it was a jersey patch, not for Brock Purdy, but one of Brock Purdy's former teammates, Dante Pettis.
The back of this card says not from any specific game or event.
As expected, this patch does not belong to Brock Purdy. It belongs to a Dante Pettis.
who played with the San Francisco 49ers for a grand total of 5 games. So, hey, at least it was a 49ers player. I guess that's better than it not being associated with anybody or associated with like a Kansas City Chiefs player. But it certainly wasn't Brock Purdy. So why is a Brock Purdy patch card belonging to another 49er who only played 5 games? This is, by the way, causing a trend of more and more people ripping open their patch cards right now on social to see what is behind them. Is this another sign of overprinting and quality control? Does this reduce the value of patch cards? I'm going to start with you on this one, Doug.
This doesn't affect my opinion of patch cards at all. This isn't news to me. For one, we've actually heard an exact story like this before. It was a Dolphins player. I can't remember who it was, but an unassociated patch, they tore it apart and it belonged to some other not very enticing player. But if a patch is not associated to any sort of player or event, then we've started calling those napkins, right? For the most part, it is what it is. It's just a piece of cloth that means nothing. And those cards have always sort of meant nothing to me. When it comes to a patch card, I will accept a completely unassociated patch if it looks cool. If it adds eye appeal to the card, that's fine. Like if it's multicolor, or if it has a piece of the logo or something like that, okay, that's pretty cool. At least it looks good on the card. But these plain unassociated patches with nothing going on, I don't understand what purpose they serve whatsoever. Then there's game worn. Game worn obviously matters. I think that actually has appeal to it. So if it's not one of those two things, either it's got to be game worn or it's got to at least look cool, then I'll care. But outside of that, I've always considered them to be kind of garbage. So this doesn't really change much for me.
I think that's a fair take. What do you take, Pete? T-Pop.
As Doug said, it's not anything new, but it might be new to new people. It's misleading. It's like borderline predatory what they do with these. I remember in the 2000s when they really started ramping up the number of game-used patches and jersey pieces and cards. That became really big. Like Fleer, obviously Upper Deck was doing, Exquisite and other things, but even Fleer and Ultra was putting a lot of game-used jersey and patch pieces into cards. And then we saw this Panini era take over, as well as, some from Topps, but really Panini kind of polluting and adulterating this thing that was previously really cool and was actually a hit, and continuing to call these things hits. So it used to be, I remember hobby boxes 2018, 2019, it'd be like, get 1 auto and 2 relics, and they'd call it 3 hits. And then eventually it shifted to a lot of products being like 1 guaranteed hit of a relic or an auto. And you just keep moving it and moving it out and moving the goalposts. But if you're new to the hobby, you open this box of something and you're like, oh my gosh, I just got a Barry Sanders like jersey piece that he wore in a game, and you're all excited and you're, about to rip it, or flip it over, and then you realize it's actually from like Matt Patricia's sweatshirt in 2018. It's not actually ever from anything Barry Sanders had anything to do with. Some of the comments on Coach Co's posts, people saying, I'm a lawyer, doesn't matter what the verbiage is, this is still a viable class action lawsuit, it's misleading, it's whatever. It's so interesting that Topps, this kind of went unnoticed, recently changed their verbiage on the backs of their cards to completely move away from the verbiage that sounded eerily similar to this Panini verbiage, which means not from any player or whatever. People would get really confused. Still, even on the short you just did about Topps Dynasty, and when we talk about it, they're like, if only it was game used. It's game used. On the front of the card, by the patch, it literally says game used. Every Dynasty card is game used. When you flip it over, the verbiage sounded, it would say like not from any specific event or game. Yeah. And people go, oh no, this isn't from the player. They just changed that verbiage and streamlined it and made it much more clear. I think probably in response to the confusion that Panini has caused by doing this in a lot of their cards. So Topps has almost always game used on almost everything. Now baseball, to give them credit, has a ton of games. It's a lot easier to get jerseys than in football or something. But still, you gotta. I just say get rid of those. Yeah. Just like I don't think people want them. To your point, it's more of an art design when it's a cool patch, even if it's manufactured. Just these little napkins. There's only one reason they do it, and it's to make people think they're getting something great.
One other thing, if you are newer to the hobby, don't get fooled by player worn. Yeah. A lot of us have probably seen that picture of Mark Ingram, I think it was, wearing like 27 huge oversized jerseys just to say they were player worn, took them all off and they cut them into pieces. Yeah. Player worn means nothing. Don't get tricked by that.
Somebody just said, I don't remember where I heard this. Somebody was just telling me they knew like a minor league baseball player or somebody who went in and they just basically said like, hey, okay.
Yeah.
Player touched. Player touched.
That's player worn.
Player touched.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was considered player worn.
Okay.
Was they're just like, can you just touch this so we can like legally say in the presence of a representative that this was worn by touching it?
Wow.
So, yeah, sketch.
All right. Gotta yeah.
Sketch.
Some stuff's gotta get better here. Okay, we gotta talk about some grading news. It's a little more positive. Some of these grading numbers we gotta talk about here. But first, I just want to give a shout out. T-Pop Market Movers, incredible growth in 2024, and January of 2025 has started off hot.
Yes, sir.
And it makes sense. Market Movers is a great way to track the value of your collection, to look up comps on any cards. The card market's heating back up again in January. People should download it.
Yes.
They should
That'd be
download it
great.
right now.
Please do.
Please download it.
Yeah.
Please go to the App Store on your phone and download the Market Movers app and check it out. Or go to sportscardinvestor.com, click Market Movers. Promo code LIVE gives you 14-day free trial. So give that a whirl. Give that a shot, and I think you're going to enjoy Market Movers. Let's talk about these grading numbers, guys. We've come to the end of 2024, and we're looking back. We're looking at GemRate's data for all of grading for 2024. 20 million total cards graded. 20 million. Biggest year ever for grading. PSA leading the way with a little bit over 15 million of those 20 million. CGC 2.3 million. SGC close to 1.9 million. Beckett 657,000. A little smaller than the others. Beckett was the only one of those grading companies that declined year over year from 23 to 24. Of the 20 million cards, sports cards accounted for 11.4 million, and TCG accounted for 8.6 million. And of the sports, baseball remained number one, most graded, but basketball actually slightly overtook football in the number two spot. Football had been number two. Basketball jumped up, and basketball grading grew the most last year, and I can give you one reason why that happened, and his name is Victor Wembanyama. Victor Wembanyama became the most graded player of 2024. PSA alone encapsulated more than 400,000 Victor Wembanyama cards, and he accounted for an astounding 6 of PSA's 10 most graded cards of the year 2024. Yeah. It's a lot of data there.
He was 16% of all basketball cards.
Crazy. Crazy. That's why basketball overtook football. One guy made it happen. T-Paul, what is your takeaway on these numbers?
I mean, the big thing that stands out to me is the concern, actually, about how many Wemby cards there are in existence and how many got graded. You're talking about almost 500,000 cards for Victor Wembanyama graded in circulation, basically from 1 year, from a rookie year and a little bit before and after with Bowman Chrome and since then. What's the theoretical market cap value of all those cards in circulation right now? $100 million? Maybe more than that? I don't know. Like just doing some basic math, it's problematic for the sustainability of Wemby's card prices for a player who's supposed to be a generational talent. So it's like this bizarre dynamic where you get so many cards in circulation and so many copies of the most iconic cards, it's hard to actually peg what those cards should be worth. Even based on his incredible performance over the last 2 months, he's been playing at a NBA All-First Team level, but it's like, how do I make sense of this? There's, like Prism, base PSA 10 on every corner now. So that's a little concerning. Obviously, SGC with major gains last year, up like, 43% or something?
Yep.
So congratulations to them. We wondered when the announcement was made that Collectors was acquiring SGC, how that would impact them and what would their approach be. And they've just been very hands-off and laissez-faire, keep doing your run the business. So obviously it hasn't hurt them, that's for sure, and maybe it has helped them in some ways. And then I think we're just sort of starting to see these other companies not named PSA just really clearly carve out niches for themselves. SGC is still very strong in the vintage game, as well as on a lot of the commodity cards for quick turnarounds when products come out, and they run a lot of specials for Bowman and other things. CGC just killing it in TCG space. Beckett's the one we've talked about. It won't belabor, just continuing to fall. So it's PSA, and then it's all these others, and that's kind of the story. But
what are your takeaways, Doug?
The overall scope of this didn't really surprise me. 20 million cards being graded. That wasn't a huge shock to me because I keep up with GemRate data every month. Shout out to Ryan at GemRate, by the way. I've known him for a few years now. He's a great guy. What surprised me was the growth of non-PSA company. Well, I guess SGC is kind of under the same umbrella with collectors, but I was really happy to see the growth with CGC and SGC. I'm happy to see that it's not just all going in one direction to PSA alone, right? That makes me optimistic that other companies are succeeding and doing well. Didn't surprise me that Beckett went the opposite way. We talk about it a lot on this show, especially recently. We've talked about it quite a bit. That wasn't a huge shock to me. The basketball number was unbelievable, and it's all because of Wemby, which is also unbelievable. I can proudly say I did not contribute a single card to Wemby's pop count. I have some. I had a handful of low-end Wembys that I meant to grade over the summer and never got around to it. Now I probably won't because I don't think they're worth much anymore. What's a PSA 10 base Wemby go for? Does it even go for $100?
It's like $75, $80 right now.
Okay, maybe I will, maybe I won't. It's not a big deal. TCG, I expected to go higher. That was probably my most surprising thing when I looked at this. TCG has been so hot recently, and it's not just Pokemon. Other markets have emerged like One Piece and things of that nature that I'm not super familiar with, but I know that they've been extremely popular. I thought that number was going to be way up, and it's just kind of barely up. So that, I don't know, that surprised me a bit. I think that might be...
TCG up 4% over the previous year.
I think maybe when we look at this recap at the end of 2025, TCG takes a bigger jump, and I bet basketball actually sees a decline.
I would
because,
agree.
Wemby propped this up so much, and there's not going to be a Wemby next year. And matter of fact, it might be not very good at all next year, that I could see basketball going down. I could see football being at the top spot, and then TCG seeing the second most growth.
I think those are good predictions. I think you're probably right on. I like that. And it's interesting seeing not just these numbers, but getting into our last story today. PSA's international expansion is underway as well. So not only have we come off a big growth year in 2024 for grading overall, but now in 2025, PSA is looking to fuel that growth further by improving services in Canada and in Europe. So they just recently announced they're going to be opening up a grading facility in Germany. And we knew that they were going to go to Europe. They had teased this a few months ago. We talked about it on the show. We didn't know exactly where. I think there was some talk, or maybe we just assumed it might be London. No, it turns out it's going to be Germany. And that's interesting, but maybe not surprising to people who have been paying attention. Germany's actually a big growth area for the sports card hobby. They got a huge show. It's going to be the biggest show in European history coming in Germany this July, early July.
Oh, it's July. Well, that's
Early
a great
July.
timing for us.
I don't think I'm going to be able to get over there for it, unfortunately, but it's going to be a great show, Card Madness, and so it's going to be a lot of fun to see what that does. And so, we've seen a lot of our Market Movers affiliates from Germany and Market Mover subscribers from Germany, right? So PSA is going to be opening up there. That's going to make the grading process much easier for European customers. And then in Canada, they're moving their grading submission center to Toronto, which they say is going to streamline things, make that a lot easier for a lot of Canadian customers to access as well. So they're going heavy into international. One thing that surprised me, PSA says that their number of international submissions has doubled each year on average for the last 5 straight years. That is some big growth, and we can expect more of it. Teapot, hearing these numbers, how bullish are you on the hobby expanding internationally, and what impact, if any, will this have on collectors here in the US?
We talked about the PSA expansion once previously in a bunch of PSA news that had been released, and I said I thought this was the biggest piece of news that Nat and PSA had advertised, was that they were expanding overseas. I think it is massive, would be an understatement, in my opinion. And I think Fanatics should be thanking Nat Turner and PSA, because if you want to 10x the hobby, the way you do it is by going international. And the way you draw international attention is by including and making grading highly accessible to collectors and to hobbyists and to people who especially want to try to make some money within the hobby, whether just to fund their own hobby and collection, or just as a means of a hustle or something like that. Grading is not just a big part, it's like the part. It's the best way to make money when you're trying to work in the hobby. So if you're going to 10x things, you got to go international. We know how big that market is, completely largely untapped for soccer cards and for soccer and everything. So they start demonstrating this. They start having maybe a Fanatics event over there. If they can get some of these international footballers in to these events like they did at Fanatics Fest in New York, have a big fan experience, get people there, get cards sent, a drop off to PSA, help, get a little taste of it. I think it's very, very, very big news. And I hate to say this, I'm not trying to rub salt in a wound, but this also means you can send your cards into a company that I believe you would be confident has good security, and there's not going to be any issues. So I think it's really big news, and I think they're going to keep expanding. Nat said they're going to, so huge.
You agree with this, Doug? Big news?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have super strong opinions on it, but I do mirror a lot of your opinions. I thought of Fanatics right away. We had a conversation some time ago when Fanatics said they wanted to 10x the hobby. We talked about how they could make that happen. I think probably one of the best ideas we had was just doing card shows, right? International card shows. And now that we've seen Fanatics Fest New York, Fanatics Fest Berlin or whatever, that would be that could be something that moves the needle, right? But this is a great move for that. PSA going abroad is really going to help bring people in. I'm pretty sure, at least. You never know. Like, I don't know how big ACE grading is over there, but PSA we feel is the standard. So I feel like them having roots outside of the U.S. is going to be a really big thing. Other than that, you know, this is something that I think could help outside of our major sports. I see soccer as being the most, you know, what could benefit the most from this. I've been bullish on the soccer market for a long time, but it's always been a long-term play, right? It's not something I thought would just overnight soccer's popular. This is a really good step to getting soccer where it should be. It's got the biggest potential for growth based on where it is now to where it could be and probably should be. This actually could move that in that direction a little bit.
I think the other one that we've had people tell us this in the past. I know nothing about it at all. But cricket is like the second most popular sport in the world.
Yeah.
And in certain parts of the world, when you get over into India and Pakistan and Australia and other parts, it's so huge. And I'm sure people who like those sports would like to collect cards of those players. I don't know, does Topps make cricket cards? Somebody does. And I think that could be a big untapped market for them too. Just interesting.
F1 could be on the rise.
F1, go. F1,
interesting. It's interesting. I mean, we've talked before, you and I, Teapot, have talked before about looking long term. You want to look 10, 20 years out. What might be the best sports card investment today? Might be some soccer, you know, might be some of the GOATs of soccer, you know, go simple, go iconic, go.
Do we pay specific attention to German
NFL?
rights?
Well, NFL is pushing into Europe big time.
Yeah,
NFL they're having multiple games now in Europe, all over the place. And I've had people, I actually met people at the National this year, big card fans, and specifically, like from Europe, specifically loving American football, like loving it. They're all about it. And they're like, I'm a huge whatever insert team fan. I met some guy from Germany who was a Lions fan, and I'm like, well, you came in at the right time. I don't know how long it'll last.
We send Europe our worst teams. That's the problem.
Yeah, the Jaguars are the unofficial.
Jags go and live over there.
It is.
You know, the Patriots were over there recently, and you know, just
a big T-Law fan base over there. Now Mac Jones, I guess. But.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know. Anyway, all right. Well, these are all good thoughts. I'm bullish on international expansion as well. It's going to be exciting to see where all of this goes. This is going to be an exciting year. Look, we're sitting here at the beginning of 2025. There's all kinds of wonder and possibility for the sports card hobby. Hopefully it is a great year for sports cards. Hopefully it's a great year for you, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully it's a great year for you out there watching. We appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget about that Arena Club slab pack drop tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Promo code SCI20 for 20% off your first purchase at Arena Club. Appreciate you watching. See you soon with our next episode. Take care.